everybody, and welcome to the Aggieville Alleycats podcast. Where come rain, shine, or anything in between, we're here to deliver to you the Kansas State sporting news that you so love. I'm Ace Edwards, right alongside
Connor Baltazar.
And today, it's the battle for the purple, folks, and also the battle for the top of the Big 12. And that is your Kansas State Wildcats going up against the Texas Christian Horned Frogs. Now, we have a lot to say, so we're just going to dive straight into it. No real time for, pleasantries, because this episode's probably already going to be an hour and a half long. But let's dive straight into their offensive stats from the previous year, as well as their record. They were a 5-7 team last year with a 3-6 conference record, 2,355 rushing yards at a clip of exactly 5 per attempt, 21 rushing touchdowns, 2,875 passing yards at a clip of 9.27. A 64.5% completion percentage, 19 passing touchdowns to 6 interceptions, a third down percentage of 46.91%, which was good for 11th best in the country, a red zone scoring percentage of 82.6, and then a touchdown percentage of 56.5, 28 sacks allowed, including what should have been 6 to Felix last year, getting 28.67 points per game and a total of 344 points for. So they were a pretty balanced team last year who definitely fell apart towards the back end of the season. And they have an entirely new staff now, but before we go into that, Connor has you for last year's defensive statistics.
Yeah, so defensively last year, they gave up a whopping 34.92 points per game for a total of 419 points against them. Passing yards, they gave up 2,877 total and 20 touchdowns. Rushing yards, 2,664 and 34 rushing touchdowns against them. They have a defensive third down percentage last year, 46.5%, which was 124th in FBS. And then a red zone scoring percentage of 70.6%. Of 90.2%, I should say, and then a touchdown rate of 70.6%, which was tied for 112th in FBS. They had 10 interceptions, 7 fumbles recovered, 15 sacks as a defense for a turnover differential of -2. One of the big things that sticks out there is that they kind of sucked, and there's very little else to say other than they were balanced in their sucking. They gave up a lot of pass yards, a lot of rush yards. They gave up a lot of points. They were not good on third down. They were not good in the red zone. They didn't get many sacks. They weren't a great unit last year.
Yeah, no, they weren't really great last year. But they are having a few notable returners from last year. And that is Max Duggan, their leading passer from last year, who didn't start the year as their starting quarterback. That was OU transfer Chandler Morris. But that's kind of working out for them, and we'll go into that later. And then they returned Kendre Miller, their second leading rusher. They're returning Quentin Johnston, their leading receiver, and an absolute monster. They're also returning Andrew Coker, who, if you remember me last year, I thought he was an amazing right tackle who wasn't getting enough love. He's fallen off the face of the earth. I don't know how he regressed so badly, but he did. Then they're returning D. Winters, who is their leading tackler, Travius Hodges Tomlinson, who is their interception and passes defense leader, and Dylan Horton, who was tied for first in sacks. They're also getting an entirely new staff, which includes Sonny Dykes at head coach and much of his staff from SMU. And I'm not going to say you can tell, but you can tell.
Yeah, obviously been doing great things so far, but really they didn't lose a ton. Although what they did lose, they were big names. Zach Evans is the big name. He's former 5-star recruit at running back. He was their leading rusher. He transferred to Ole Miss, I believe, after the staff changes in the offseason. O'Shawn Mathis, sack leader, he ends up transferring to Nebraska.
I don't think that's working out too good for.
I think that's a fair statement to make. And then they also lose Obena Easy, left tackle, to graduation. But really, other than that, this team is not losing much from last year. So even if you have a team that was kind of mediocre, they definitely were a talented team last year, at least athletically.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, yeah, they do lose Zach Evans, who's having a really nice year at Ole Miss. He's got over 600 yards and 7 touchdowns. And O'Shawn Mathis was an excellent pass rusher. But they return a ton, and that's already a team that's pretty athletic across the board. Just probably needed some better coaching. So that's kind of a good position to be in going into a year, and a new staff is an excellent situation to walk into.
But as for this year, Connor, you have the schedule, and then I'll spit more numbers at people with their 2022 stats.
Yeah. So very briefly before this season, at least how it's been going, the expectations for TCU going into the year were not high, including at this podcast, including everybody under the face of the earth, probably including TCU fans. Honestly, they were not expecting much with the coaching change. And now they are sitting at 6-0 against a quality schedule. We start with a not quality opponent, though. We have at Colorado to start the year, where they end up winning 38-13. And they actually do lose their starting quarterback in this game, Chandler Morris, which leads the way for former starter Max Duggan to start the following game against Tarleton. And they blow out Tarleton 59-17, throw all over the field. Probably not a fair matchup there. They win the Iron Skillet against SMU 42-34. They blow out OU the week after we beat them in Norman. They go on the road to 5-0 KU and win that game 38-31. And then they just beat 5-0 Oklahoma State 43-40. So every team that they have played at the time they played them either had 0 losses or 1 loss. Granted, bit of a misnomer of Colorado, because they
hadn't
to this
played
point have
anyone.
1 win.
Yeah. And I don't mean they didn't play anyone in the, they don't play anybody, Paul. No, they literally hadn't played anybody.
Yeah, but then they beat an OU team that, while they are definitely down, that's still a very athletic and gifted team that is probably going to come around and still have a good year. They beat an undefeated KU team that had all the momentum in the world on the road at that. And they beat Oklahoma State in an excellent, excellent game that you completely, if you were not able to see this, you really missed out. So yeah, it's been a beyond the wildest dream scenario so far for TCU starting 6-0.
Absolutely. Which, as we mentioned before, they're 6-0 with a 3-0 conference record. They have 1,375 rushing yards, 6.3 per attempt, 1,785 passing yards, 9.2 per attempt, 16 passing touchdowns to 1 interception, and that 1 interception was against KU on a whatever end of half ball. And then
pretty big asterisk next to that.
Yeah. 20 rushing touchdowns, a third down percentage on offense of 44.44 repeating percent, which is 43rd in FBS. And then on defense, they're giving up third downs at 38.95% of the time, which is 71st in FBS. And then the big one, points per game. They're averaging 45.83 points per game, which is 3rd in FBS, with 275 points for, 159 points against, a turnover differential of +5, getting 12 sacks, a red zone defensive percentage of 86.9, or defensive, I should say, 86.9%, scoring 60.9% touchdowns, which is a tie for 94th with Oklahoma State. And then on offense, they're scoring 86.2% of the time, and touchdowns are being scored 72.4% of the time, which is 51st in FBS. So this is a notably improved squad. They are, without exaggeration, 3 passing touchdowns off of their total from last year, and 1 rushing touchdown away from their total from last year. It's much improved.
Yeah. Almost everything about this team offensively has gotten significantly better from the year prior. And Max Duggan even looks like a completely different quarterback I've always liked Max Duggan, but I will not lie and act like I figured that he was like capable of a 16 touchdown, one pick season through. And with the one pick really kind of being meaningless, I mean, I'd equate it to basically a garbage time. Like, obviously, the game was so competitive, but there was like 10 seconds left in the half, and they just threw a Hail Mary ball, but only to Quentin Johnston. And it
Hmm.
just got picked by a lurking safety,
Yeah.
which ultimately had zero effect on the game. So that's a big, big asterisk. But he has been phenomenal this year for the most part, at least statistically. A lot of the help comes from Quentin Johnson existing, which we will get to him a little later, I suppose. But
Yeah.
the offense at TCU right now is humming. I venture to say it's special.
Yeah.
What they've been able to do so far.
Yeah. And you can take their offensive takeaways and their personnel.
Yeah. So one easy thing that you can probably guess is that they are a spread team, kind of similar to some of those mid 20 teens TCU teams that you probably think of when you think of TCU, the Trevon Boykin era of TCU, where they were high tempo, borderline frenetic pace, um, peak Big 12. Um, they, however, did not keep that pace this year, though. They're 73rd in the country in plays per game, averaging 69.6. K-State, for reference, is 14 spots behind, averaging 68.2, which K-State's pace is not phenomenal. Still like up by like 10 plays per game compared to last year. They
Yeah.
even had a game where they got like into the 80s, I think. Um, they do play almost exclusively in a twins and doubles alignment with their receivers. And when they're not doing that, they're in trips. Um, a part of what what they do is play their receivers in a stack alignment, which is just one lined up directly behind the other. It it is what it looks like. They are stacked but on
Yeah.
each other. It's very simple.
Yeah.
In order to prevent receivers getting pressed at the line, which we've seen K State do a little bit of, kind of more bunching, I guess, is what K State's done. But
Yeah.
they do run a lot of stack. You saw some of that against Oklahoma State. This forces at least one defensive back to back off, leaving the wide receiver screen game a lot more open. And this offense is very explosive. They are second in the country in yards per play at 7.3 yards per play. They have 23 plays of 30 yards or more, which is tied for third. And they have 850 plus yard plays, which is tied for first. So this team is like a juiced up version of the K State offense, at least right now, in terms of getting those explosive plays, although they are definitely more consistent, but they do rely on explosive plays, at least to a degree.
Yeah. Do you want to
Which
know who they are tied for first? Sorry. Do you want to know who they are tied for first with in 50-yard plays?
is it something I could easily guess?
Probably.
Is it Tennessee?
No.
Is it Bama?
It's Ohio State.
That that actually makes more sense. But
Just fun fact of the day.
the more you know. But and then for personnel, they're spread, as we said earlier. They're going to spend most of their time in 10 and 11 personnel, lean towards 10. And 11, the tight end is playing the wing and is primarily a blocker. They also have a split back look from shotgun that they go to a few times a game. And they played a little 12 personnel against KU, but that was probably just a product of the opponent as opposed to a more consistent philosophy of their offense. And they probably just saw something there that caused them to do so.
Yeah. That's pretty much yeah, that's my assessment of them. They're an insanely explosive offense. And to go along with that is just how they call their plays. So despite this being an insanely explosive offense, you hear explosive plays, you automatically think, oh, they're passing the ball like 70% of the time. That's actually not the case. Their run pass splits is actually 48.7 to the pass and then 48.3 to the pass and then 51.7 in the run, which granted, a lot of that is RPO screens. So, it's kind of a run play, kind of a pass play, but the split is what the split is. And in the running game, it's just inside zone. Yeah, It's inside zone. I saw them run a counter once. That was cool. It's inside zone. It's,
Yep.
yeah. In terms of play action, they do that on 28.1% of their dropbacks. Screens are the exact same number, which is really funny because not all of their screens are play action. It just happened to work out that way. But motion is a part of their game plan, mostly as a coverage indicator to set up some RPO. And if you're curious about what their favorite passing concepts include, basically here is their entire offense from a passing perspective, sans like maybe 3 or 4 plays. We run a play call concept called Yankee, which is 2 deep posts to clear for a deep crossing route from the opposite side, most of the time to Quentin Johnston, because why wouldn't you throw that to Quentin Johnston? Slot fade, which is a variation of smash, which has the outside receiver running a tight curl and the slot receiver running a fade going towards the sideline, meant to pressure that outside corner and put them in a bad spot. Sail, which is also called flood in a lot of other vernaculars. The outside receiver runs a go to clear for a deep out from the slot receiver. And then stick, which is from trips or twins. The innermost receiver runs a hitch. Sometimes it's an option route that can turn into an out. The second outside receiver or a running back runs into the flat, and then the outside receiver runs a go, which acts as the alert route, which, by the way, outside receiver running a go 9 times out of 10, Quentin Johnston. And I'm not sure there's ever a situation where throwing to Quentin Johnston is objectively a bad decision, especially in college.
Yeah, he is a madman. I don't want to talk about him too much because we'll have plenty of time to later, but wow.
Yeah. Then they have wide receiver smoke screen, which is the outermost / furthest back in a stack receiver, takes a step back and runs behind the other receivers who are blocking. And then finally, mesh post, which is 2 drags that cross and intersect close to one another with a post from the outside receiver, guess who, following immediately behind one of them, meant to abuse the linebackers in zone coverage with the post, and in man coverage meant to create a natural rub. That's pretty much their passing game. Now, you may be saying, oh, well, that sounds very, very simple to beat. Like, there has to be. No, all of these beat different coverages and in different ways. Yankee beats man coverage in cover 3 and cover 4, and especially cover 6. God help you if you run cover 6 against us. Slot Vade kills cover 2 every single time. Sail murders cover 3. Stick murders man coverage. Wide receiver smoke screen. It's a screen. Mesh post kills both man and more conservative types of zone. They have something to beat every coverage. It just depends on what coverage they think you're running. I've talked for a while. Connor, do you have any thoughts? And then you get to cover your favorite quarterback in history. It's not your favorite quarterback.
Yeah. Well, for one, their offensive coordinator is Lincoln Riley's brother, I believe.
Yes, it is. Garrett Riley.
Yeah, Garrett Riley. Yeah, I remember they kept showing him, and I was like, why is Lincoln Riley wearing TCU?
Oh, it's going to take more than that to impress. Oh.
But yeah, he looks a lot like him, even wears the shades and everything. Like it was all of a sudden it made a lot more sense why TCU's offense was as good as it is, because he either is as good as Lincoln Riley or he just calls him and says, hey, what should I do? And Lincoln Riley says, here is offense, and then they do that. But yeah, phenomenal offense. We'll get into the positions now. Max Duggan, number 15, 4-year starter this year with an asterisk. He has been excellent this year, starting since week 2. He has been really, really great. 69.5% completion percentage, 1,591 yards, 16 touchdowns, and the 1 pick, which again, I don't even hold it against him. You might as well consider him to have 0 picks on the year, honestly, because the 1 pick, it was really just like a end of the half, let's just see what happens kind of throw.
Yeah.
He's got 261 yards on the ground and 5 rushing touchdowns. He had at least 1 really long run. I think it might have been against OU.
I think it was as well.
Yeah. But yeah, his PFF grade this year is 83.5, 77.2 in the passing game, and then an 89.1 in the run game. However, under pressure, that does go down to 58.8 overall and a 54.6 passing grade. So definitely something that is something to keep an eye on with our defense. So there's one thing we are good at, it's bringing pressure and collapsing a pocket on defense, especially with guys like Felix and Yuki Uzama, and hopefully Nate Matlick, who hopefully is healthy by this point.
Yeah.
But
Kleiman
we'll
said
go,
that he was as healthy as he's been this year.
yeah, well,
We'll see.
allegedly. But
Allegedly.
yeah, some more stuff on Duggan. He's completing 57.7% of his passes that are 20 yards or more downfield, which is huge because last year downfield accuracy wasn't really a thing for him. And this year he's completely turned that around. He has been excellent. Absolutely zero doubt thus far this year. Every single game, it feels like he's making huge plays. And he's only got the one pick. And he's been high completion percentage. He's been above 65% in every single game except for the Oklahoma State game, which fair. That's a tough defense.
That's fair.
And he's been absolutely excellent this entire season. His arm strength is good. It's not elite or anything like that, but it's solid. And he does get impatient at times. Will sometimes only read, or most of the time, really, he's only reading one side of the field, but he is at least processing on that side. He is going through and making reads. He does not like short throws or checkdowns. He really likes the big play. It was even noted in the Oklahoma State game that they had checkdowns wide open the entire game, and he really didn't take them because he was just trying to get downfield as much as he could. They didn't really go to that check down until really late when they needed to get down the field, and they got like 15 yards because Oklahoma State was playing so far off of the check down because they didn't think he'd actually throw it ever. If the play goes on for longer than what it's time for, he kind of lets his feet die. But a little bit after that happens, he's going to be gone. And so if he ever gets flat-footed, he's about to run. He is absolutely gone. So just take off, run at that man as fast as possible. He is actually faster than you would think. You could say he has deceptive speed. He's a real gym rat.
All right, I'm good.
Anywho, not sure what you're laughing at. I'm just making comments about Max Duggan.
Coach's favorite player. First guy in, last guy out.
He's just a real blue collar athlete, but he is a threat on the ground regardless. He prefers going through the front door rather than the outside. When he is under pressure, his technique struggles, which is consistent with his passing ability really struggling and going down once he is pressured. So not shocking there. But Max Duggan, he's dangerous. He's, I would say, probably the leader right now in terms of favorites for first team All Big 12. And he's not even the guy they started the year with. I mean, they started with Chandler Morris. Max Duggan is excellent. He's dangerous. And a lot of why he's dangerous is because of the weapons around him.
Yeah. If it were up to me and the season ended like tomorrow, Max Duggan, if I were voting, would probably get my All Big 12 like first team vote for quarterback. And I'm saying that as, an Adrian Martinez truther. Max Duggan has been nuts this entire year. But they also have two really good running backs that, like Connor said earlier, there aren't many weaknesses on this offense. It bordering on special in terms of talent, but their two running backs both have numbers exclusively made of threes, and that is Kendre Miller, number 33, and Emari Demercado, goodness gracious, number 3. Starting off with Kendre Miller, he has 91 rushes for 578 yards, 8 touchdowns, and 7 catches for 57 yards. A 75.7 PFF grade, 49.1 in the passing game, and then 79.5 in the running game. The first thing that sticks out about Kendre Miller is his vision. He doesn't miss many open lanes, and he also knows. I talk about this with DJ Giddens whenever watching him, and it's something I've been super impressed with, and will always be impressed with at the college level. And that's he knows how to press into his blocks to make it harder for linebackers to try, backdoor it for a TFL. So he's reading leverage. He's going through and he's hitting holes when he needs to. He's not gonna run himself into tackles for loss, which is this is a problem a lot of home run hitting backs tend to have. And Kendre Miller has that home run threat, but he also, isn't going to run himself into a bunch of TFLs. The downside is he's not a very booming back. He's not your traditional power back, but he will fall forward by virtue of making every single contact that's hit against him very weak. And that's because he's kind of like Deuce in that he's not as good at it as Deuce because like no one is, but he's able to contort his body in some really creative ways to make sure he doesn't get hit hard so he can fall forward. And in terms of top speed, it's fine. Acceleration's fine. And another thing is that he has one move, it's nasty, and it's the spin move. Like his spin move should not exist. It should not be legal. It's it's nasty. It's gross. And by that I mean it's gross for in a way that benefits him, not in a way that it's actually bad. But next up is Imari Demercado. He has 36 rushes for 246 yards and 4 touchdowns, 3 catches for 28 yards, a 68.9 PFF grade, 55.3 in the passing game, and then 72.5 in the running game. He also has pretty good vision, and he's very good at making the minor adjustments in his movement without losing momentum. He's more of he's the twitchier of the two backs, and he can even make some pretty great moves in space, but he just doesn't have that power. He's probably the faster of the two, but he isn't nearly as strong. But neither of these backs are slouches in any stretch of the imagination. In fact, I think De Mercado probably got it right first time that try. I I think that he's probably a starter on maybe a few other Power Five rosters, maybe even some in the Big 12. He may actually start at like West Virginia. He may be in the rotation at Baylor, but neither of these backs are bad. Kendre Miller, I think, is actually quite good. But that's not what makes this offense horrifying. Connor, you have the first two parts of what makes this offense terrifying.
All right. So wide receiver, the first two guys that we have are number 1, Quentin Johnston, and number 18, Savion Williams. Quentin Johnston is many things, but above all, he is absolutely terrifying. He is 6'4", 215 pounds. Something that Ace and I have realized is it's like if Malik Knowles reached his final form. In some ways, athletically at least. After the catch, he's very similar. But the difference is that he's a borderline NFL ready receiver. He is absolutely excellent. He's a monster. And he's having an incredible year. And that year he's currently, I think, borderline leading the Big 12 in receiving, if not solely. And if not, he's doing it after, in the first 4 weeks of the season, having games of 22, 22, 29, and 41 yards. In the last 2 weeks, he's had games against Oklahoma State where he had 8 catches for 180 yards and a touchdown, 22 yards per catch. And then against KU, 14 catches, 206 yards, 14.7 yards per catch and a touchdown. He was excellent. He was really good last year. This year, though, he has become a whole different beast. 34 catches, 500 yards, 14.7 per catch and 2 touchdowns, 80.5 PFF grade, 80.3 pass grade, drop rate of 8.1%. And then the last 2 weeks, a 90.9 grade against KU and an 89.8 against Oklahoma State. Going into the year, I would have said there's a conversation. Ace would have said this as well. There's a conversation about who the best receiver in the Big 12 is, and it revolves around Xavier Worthy, Quentin Johnston, like Xavier Hutchinson. But he is the best receiver in the Big 12 right now.
Yeah.
And there's no doubt about it. He
And by the way, to go back earlier, he's the third leading receiver behind Xavier Hutchinson, who has nearly 800 yards, and Marvin Mims, who has 42 more.
That's shocking that Mims has more because I feel like he's been very quiet the last few weeks. But anywho,
Yeah,
Johnston,
sorry.
no, it's fine. It's fine. Thank you for that. Johnston, he is one of the most dangerous receivers in not just the Big 12, but in the entire country. He is high level in everything he does. He has an unbelievable catch radius, great catch through contact. He climbs the ladder over you. He goes through you. He breaks you down and gets open. And even if you cover him well, he will simply push him off you after he makes the catch anyways. So it hardly matters. And his catch after the catch, shiftier than you would think. Looking at him being 6'4", 215, he will just juke you out, break your ankles, move around you. And if he decides that he doesn't want to go through all that effort, he will simply run over you. His speed is really great, very good acceleration. The really only quality he has that isn't elite or borderline elite is that he isn't an elite separator in his routes. He still separates plenty well. He's just not elite at it. And then, like I said earlier, he's like if Malik Knowles reached his final form, pretty much. He is unbelievable. And really the only way to even have a shot at covering him is to just have somebody who matches him in size and athletic attributes shadow him. Hopefully, hint, we have one of those.
or bracket him. Like that's
or bracket.
You can't body him. It's not possible. You can't do that. You can't body Quentin Johnston. It's not happening.
That particular strategy, you're gonna get destroyed. Like when we tried like one-on-one Omar Daniels v Marvin Mims, that obviously didn't work. This would go much worse than that would, because it would happen over and over and over again. And Quentin Johnston, it cannot be understated how good Quentin Johnston is. And you would be remiss to doubt him. Last year going into the TCU game, you and I were very worried about Quentin Johnston, and we contained him fairly well. I can only hope that we can come close to replicating even a fraction of that. If we hold him to any amount of yardage and 0 touchdowns, I won't be displeased.
No, we take those.
If we keep him under like 125, honestly, and contain everybody else.
I'm popping champagne.
Yeah. And that's not an indictment of this. That is not an indictment of this pass defense. I am simply accepting Quentin Johnston's likely going to get his. We just need to limit scores. And that's it. But there are other people in this room not named Quentin Johnston. First of which is Savion Williams. He's 6'5", 215, 14 catches, 144 yards, and 2 touchdowns. He is much more human, at least for now. 60 PFF grade, 58.7 pass grade, 12.5% drop rate. He doesn't really use his size as well as you would think. Not a lot of 6'5" receivers that you run into, but you wouldn't guess it other than when he's blocking. And he's just a really great blocker. He can make catches outside of his frame if asked to, but he just has a consistency issue with that. His drop rate is a little bit higher than you would like if you're a TCU fan, and he doesn't separate very well either. He's just not a particularly great route runner. But all in all, he's a solid receiver. Again, just not phenomenal. He's not really had a great game. His best performances came kind of in the middle of what we've seen so far, which was SMU and OU, where he had 3 catches in each of those games. But again, he's not been overly dangerous thus far this year, knock on wood, because the last thing we need is another receiver to worry about to the level of Johnston. But so Ace, if you want to take the other 2 receivers.
Yeah. The other two receivers are number 4, Tay Barber, and number 11, Darius Davis. Starting off with Tay Barber, he's a fifth-year player. He has 14 catches for 262 yards on the year with 2 touchdowns. That's not a typo. That's not a typo. He's averaging like 20 yards a catch.
Those are some Byron Pringle numbers.
Yeah. 67.5 PFF grade, 63.4 in the passing game, and a 6.7 drop rate. The number one thing is he's shifty. He's used a lot as the screen guy that they can trust to make someone miss and get the extra yards after the catch whenever the ball is in his hands. And of the receivers listed, he's the most like the slot archetype. He's the shifty route runner who finds holes in zone coverage when asked to, and then gets yards after the catch. He has solid hands, solid speed, can make people miss in the open field. He's reliable. He's that reliable, smart fifth-year player that you're going to, despite him not even coming close to leading the team in catches, he's reliable. He's good, as you can see, and he's able to get open, even deep, and even when it's not deep, he can house it anywhere on the field. Next up is number 11, Darius Davis. He has 21 catches on the year, 224 yards, and 3 touchdowns. A 66.9 PFF grade, a 67.9 passing game, and a 4.5 drop percentage. From a purely statistical standpoint, he has the best hands on the team. Again, that's purely statistical. He has a pretty good degree of snap out of his routes, and he's sent in motion just about as much as Barber is. And he also serves as the kick returner, which speaks to his ability in the open field. So you have 2 monsters in Savion Williams and, the scariest receiver in the Big 12, and it's not close, in Quentin Johnston. And then you have the 2 more finessey guys in Tay Barber and Darius Davis. So this receiving core it's scary. I'm not going to lie to you. It's scary. Every night it haunts my dreams. But it'll be an interesting matchup, and we'll talk about it later. Connor, you have tight ends, fullbacks, and do you want left side or right side of the line?
I'll take left.
Okay.
One last note on the receivers. The lone silver lining for us and the rest of the Big 12 is the Tay Barber and Darius Davis are seniors, and Quentin Johnson is almost certainly going to be going to the NFL as an eligible junior. So at least most of these guys will probably not be here next year. Hoping so.
Please.
I don't want to deal with them again.
Never again, please.
Moving on. Moving on to tight ends, fullbacks. Jared Wiley, number 19, is the guy here. 7 catches for 62 yards on the year. 75.5 PFF grade, 80 grade in the pass, and then a 54.2 run block grade. He is an okay blocker. He's fine. Solid, one might say. Mediocre. Average, perhaps. He's fine. He's fine. Yeah. He doesn't do much in this offense. He, without a doubt, is a football player that exists. He's really big. He's 6'7", 255. Mm-hmm. And that's about all that can be said about him. He's okay.
Yeah, he exists.
So I'll move to the left side of the offensive line. First of all, O-line in general, they're giving up pressure on 27.6% of dropbacks, 9 sacks, given up so far, just 4.76% of dropbacks for this TCU team, which is tied for 46th in FBS. So a little above average there, and preventing sacks thus far. But we will see if that continues, because he was only sacked once against Oklahoma State. He has a really good defensive line. On the other hand, he got sacked 5 times against SMU. So a lot of his sacks came in that one game. Yeah. So going to be interested to see how that offensive line holds up. I feel like we'll learn a lot about them after the game. But right now, we can tell you what we know before. That left tackle, Brandon Coleman, number 77. He's a 2-year starter to redshirt junior, 6'6", 325 pounds, and wears a cowboy color. at left tackle, which I know Ace loves the cowboy collar. I also love the cowboy collar. I honestly prefer it uncovered. The covered look has its place, but I do prefer the not covered cowboy collar. I think it's such a cool look. I say
Yeah.
cool. I don't know if that's necessarily true, but
Well, the
it
covered
it is
look makes
certainly
you look
one of
like a
the
Ninja Turtle, so I don't.
fair. I suppose that is true, but he's got that look. 69.1 PFF grade, 67.8 pass blocker, and then a 65.9 run blocker. So fairly solid there. Um, his arm position when starting his pass sets is a little too extended, so he's not getting the greatest punch or the quickest hands on the rusher. He's susceptible to any move that focuses on his arms rather than his body. So hopefully Felix will have some moves in his arsenal for him.
Or Felix can just
He can
bully
hold
him.
his
Like,
own. Yeah, which to be fair, Felix does that to most individuals that he faces, but
yeah.
um, he's going to be susceptible to any move. I already said that. Excuse me. As an anchor and pass protection, though, he can more than hold his own. Um, so if he's able to set up shop, he's going to do a solid job. But if you meet him with a speed rush from kind of a wide nine almost, he's not going to do so well because he oversets the inside and gets himself leaning forward. He just kind of like
False.
yeah, he falls a la Christian Duffy. Um,
He always catches at least one stray.
he always does, and I feel so bad because like he's actually been pretty solid this year, I think.
He's
But
been
like,
good.
I, I I can never forget about that. Anywho, in run blocking, he's good at getting his hips flipped to seal off an edge. He does have that issue remaining though with his arms. He can get knocked off of his game pretty easily. But he's fine. Then we move into left guard, Steve Avila, number 79, a 3-year starter and a redshirt senior. 6'4", 330 pounds, a 68.5 PFF grade, 88.2 pass blocking grade, and a 64.7 run block. I am not sure why his overall grade is that low and his pass block is that high. They didn't ask me, but unbelievable pass blocker as his grade indicates. He is looking for work. He can handle himself on an island. He does a really nice job providing help to either the left guard Coleman or to the center whenever he doesn't have somebody right up on him. And he keeps his eyes up really well as well. However, once you get him out of that situation and get him in space, that isn't his ideal situation.
Don't
He
do
just
that to
doesn't,
him.
yeah, he doesn't get the push that he needs. He just kind of spawns at the second level, but not in a good way. He just kind of appears and is there, and he says, "I am here to block you," and they just say, "I do not care," and move along. But incredible pass blocker is Steve Avila, but yeah, he is not the best in space, not the greatest run blocker.
Yeah. And then starting with their center for the right side of the line, it's Alan Ali, number 56. He's a redshirt senior transfer from SMU, so followed Sonny Dykes. A 6'5", 300-pound center, a 66.1 PFF grade, 77.6 in run and pass block, and then 60.1 run blocking. His biggest thing is that he's not that strong by center standards, and he can get bodied pretty easily by bigger nose tackles. This is honestly a game where I could see Uso getting in, like instead of like, D Hence will obviously be, the second guy off the bench, but Uso may get in a little bit more because I think he might be a little stronger, whereas Hence is a little more finessey. He still has strength, don't misunderstand me, but Uso is like 340 pounds Samoan man. So or he might be Hawaiian. I don't either or. Polynesian. He's big boy, big man. Um, but he doesn't get a great first punch on anyone directly lined up on him. But he's best when he's not going straight forward. And that's where most of his strengths are. He's a very, very good lateral mover, both in the inside zone game and in pass protection. So as long as you, and this is going to sound very strange, so long as he is not moving forward, he's great. which is such a strange thing to say about a center. But, as long as he is not moving forward, it's a great center. Then moving on to their right guard, which is Wes Harris, number 78, a redshirt senior. He is 6'4", 315 pounds, a 61.5 PFF grade, 66.9 pass block, and a 60.3 run blocking grade. And he's also good at keeping his eyes up and making clean trade-offs against stunts, which he had to do against Okie State a bit. And in the running game, he just kind of picks the wrong linebacker to block on inside zone, which is kind of funny because, you're always taught to aim where you think the linebacker is going to be on a lot of those plays. And he just picks the wrong one.
You know what? That could happen to anybody.
It really could have. He doesn't pick up to cut him off. He just kind of drifts to the other linebacker. It's kind of a problem with both guards, honestly. But he's an all right Big 12 guard who has pretty good head on his shoulders. And then finally, the saddest I've ever been about an opposing player kind of falling off, and that's right tackle number 74, Andrew Coker, a 3-year starter, redshirt junior, 6'7", 315 pounds, a 58.7 PFF grade, 65 pass block, 59.1 run block. I don't know what happened between last year and this one, but he's regressed so far. His footwork has gotten so sloppy, and his kick side just looks slow. And it's such a shame because he looked so good last year. He looked so fluid as a tackle. And he's also developed the habit of getting grabby. He's not always called for it. In fact, I only think he has 3 penalties on the year, and 2 were against Okie State, and 1 was somewhat questionable. But he's just getting grabby for an outside tackle. And all that being said, he's still not bad. He's just not as good as he was last year. He can anchor himself really well, and his hands are pretty good. He can pretty much match hand fighting with anyone. He's kind of the opposite of Coleman at left tackle. And he's still a good run blocker, especially when he's acting as the more lead blocker on more outside zone plays. But, Andrew Coker is, hate to say it, but he's regressed. And honestly, he may be the weak point on this line this year as opposed to last year when he was kind of the strength of it. Such a strange thing to think about. But before I start waxing poetic about that, you and I can kind of split defense here. And if you don't mind, I'll take explaining the defensive front because it's such a strange thing to me. It's one of my brain scrunklies. I have to talk about it.
No, yeah, this is your particular passion project here. So I will let you take the lead. Don't mind me.
Okay. So moving on to defense. In terms of their defensive front, they run a front that isn't really tight, odd, or stack. It's a front that I don't quite know the name of, but it's essentially a 3-tech and a 1 technique on the weak side and then a 4-eye on the strong side. So basically, outside shoulder of the guard, inside shoulder of or left side shoulder, and if formation strength is to the right, left side shoulder of the center, and then on the inside shoulder of the tackle on the opposite side of the strong side of the play. And sometimes the strong side guy flexes all the way out to a wide 9 on obvious passing downs. It's very funny, but it's very funny because you just get you just get 2 defensive linemen who are super close to one another on the other side of the formation. And then you just B gaps open, C gaps open. Oh, there's a defensive end playing in outer space, I guess. But and before I go any further, I'm really waiting for a QB power on 3rd and 15 that will abuse this fact because I'm calling my shot here. That's going to be a play call. But
yeah,
it's such a strange. And I had a discussion with someone on Twitter today that was, it was supposed to be a schematic thing more against Oklahoma State because they run a lot of counters, which is true. They do run a lot of counters. But the only game that I have seen, granted, I've only seen 4 of their 6. The only game where I've seen them come out with that look with less consistency than 50% of the time was up against KU. And that's because the way KU's offense works is you want to be as balanced as possible just because of how they handle motion. But it's their primary front, and that kind of leaves them susceptible to, you'd think it would leave them susceptible to outside zone. Oklahoma State tried that. That did not work well for them. But they only managed like 3.4 yards per carry, if I'm remembering correctly. But something to that effect. But what you want to do against this type of front is you want to try and attack that B gap as best you can, which you can do, halfback dive, basically. And Deuce can, this is something that I think Deuce especially can take advantage of because he can just hide behind his block. I know it's a short joke. I know it's not even a joke. It's a thing that he can actually do. He can hide behind the right guy. He can hide behind Hadley Panzer in this case. He can just hide behind him and then just get to the second level easy as can be. But that's kind of their defensive front. They have another front, which is just the typical tight front, nose tackle, guys on tackles. But that's my brain scrunkly of the week. You can talk about the rest.
Yeah. They operate a lot on instinct, defensively, and a bit on blitzing. From a balanced look, like pistol, which K-State has been running a little bit more of this year. They'll play just kind of your traditional stack front. However, in general, a lot of their impact plays from their defensive line come from a slanting alignment and how they attack gaps and outside shoulders of linemen rather than the lineman himself. The same goes for their linebackers. It feels like more often than not, at least one of them is sent on a blitz of some sort, and how they rush is much more effective than their ability to be game wreckers. So similar to K-State, it can be taken advantage of on defense if you slow play things like runs and force them to be patient and assignment sound. Very similar to how Texas Tech approached K-State's defense in the second and third quarters of that game, where they were very successful running the football just by playing it patient, taking their time, and letting K-State overrun. TCU is pretty similar. But yeah, personnel, I can get into this as well because you just talked for like 5 minutes straight.
Yeah. Sorry, it's a brain scrunkly. I had to.
No, I understand. It's fine. They run the same 3-3-5 hybrid kind of defense that everybody in the Big 12 runs nowadays, it feels like. The difference is that they don't really play a lot of 3 high. So congratulations, Ace. You do not have to watch 3 high the entire game.
Let's go.
They do run it sometimes, but rarely. Not often. They generally have the third safety play kind of in the box or slot, kind of more of a like cat safety almost.
Mm-hmm.
K-State used to run a lot of that. Kind of in the mid 2000 teens. Guy like Randall Evans will probably ring a bell in that regard for K-State. And then a part of this goes to their coverage philosophy as a 3 high. It just wouldn't make much sense. They have a notable preference for man coverage, or they like match, especially in coverages. They like single high, like cover 1. Although they also have a preference for semi single high coverages, like cover 6. They really enjoy rolling their safeties, be it rolling them down closer to the box or rotating them to the passing strength of the field. A lot of their coaching philosophy, though, does leave them vulnerable to the QB run game. And it also leaves them pretty vulnerable to routes in the flat or routes from non-traditional receivers like tight ends or running backs. If you run a running back screen, they just simply are not equipped to handle that as a defense, just by virtue of how aggressive they are in rolling their defenses. So if you just pick the right side, then it might be all over for them.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the counters that people will say to the quarterback running game is, Jalen Daniels he didn't have a great day. Spencer Sanders was mostly contained. You see, here's the thing is that they had literally, there was a snap, and I imagine this was not an uncommon reprieve. They had a snap where they had, I am not joking, not 1, not 2, but 3 quarterback spies on Spencer Sanders. I imagine they have the same at least once or twice for Jalen Daniels. It was very funny watching everyone else just play straight man coverage, and then you see 3 defenders just eyeballing Spencer Sanders. But Now that the schematics bit is over with, we can talk about their actual personnel, starting with their interior defensive line, which is made up predominantly by two people: Dominic Williams, number 52, and Timon Mitchell. Goodness gracious, what is with me today? Number 91. Starting off with Williams, he's actually a true freshman, so there's that. He has 10 tackles, 2 TFLs, 1.5 sacks, a 65.3 PFF grade, 63.4 run defense, 67.6 tackling, and then 63.6 in the pass rush. All of his strengths and weaknesses stem from the fact that he's massive. He's just a big dude. He's just a big guy. He can two gap a running play by virtue of existing. And I know that sounds like a fat joke, and it's not meant to be. He's just that big, and he has the strength to back it up. But the thing is, he's a tick or two slow off the ball, which you really don't want as a nose tackle. And a part of this might be because he's just playing the run, and his top goal is to float along with the play, not necessarily to blow it up. He's much more the prevent the big play kind of tackle than the wreck it before it gets started type of player. But he's still big. He's still strong. He's a big dude. He has 1.5 sacks on the year, so he's gotten through a few times. And then Timon Mitchell, a transfer from Georgia. Yes, a transfer from Georgia came to TCU. And yes, he plays about as well as you think he does. Excuse me. He has 10 tackles, 2.5 TFLs, and 2 sacks. A 78 PFF grade, 73.7 run defense, 78.6 tackling, and then a 74.8 pass rush. His biggest weakness is his hand placement, which is a bit high, which is so strange because he plays with a really good pad level. So it kind of just looks like he's reaching upwards a lot, which is a weird problem to have, but okay. And his biggest thing is because, no offense to Williams, but he's clearly the better player. He's brought in a lot on passing downs or the more high leverage situations, and he's relentless to say the least. He's not the type of player that's gonna make one move and say, "Oh well, we've done nothing and I'm out of ideas." But he'll if his initial rush doesn't work, he'll try to go for a club, he'll try to go for a swim, he'll try to work to a different gap. He's not someone who's just going to lay down when he's blocked, and that's one of the best things that you could ask for a interior defensive lineman, especially because he's big enough to where he can push the pocket and make people uncomfortable. So let's just say that no matter what front they're running, Hayden Gillum is going to have a handful no matter who's running at nose tackle, but you have their edge players.
Yeah. So on the edge, you've got number 98, Dylan Horton, and number 95, Terrell Cooper. Starting out with Horton, he's got 13 tackles, 1.5 tackles for loss, 3 pass breakups, and 4 quarterback hurries on the season. He has a 75 PFF grade, 77.4 run defense grade, and a 73.1 tackle grade to go with a 66.6 rush defense grade. While he's pretty solid in 1v1. If his rush gets redirected, he's pretty much done for. If you're able to push him inside, get just another set of hands on him. If you're able to push him past and get him out of the way, it's going to be rough. Kind of indicates I'm kind of a motor player, but if you just like kind of get in his way, then that's kind of it. But run defense, he's quick enough and big enough to be a dangerous force player and one that can break past anybody if you don't meet him head on. So he's a solid edge guy. Again, really good run force type of person, which is more valuable than you would think. And it's one of those things that just doesn't show up on the stat sheet, but is unbelievably valuable. It's something Boom Massey did really well for K-State last year. He was excellent at the run force.
Yeah.
Terrell Cooper, on the other hand, 9 tackles, 1.5 tackles for loss, a pass breakup, a quarterback hurry, and a forced fumble. He's got 67.5 on PFF, 78.7 run defense grade, 67.8 tackle, and a 49.9 pass rush grade. He has a quick set of hands that he can use to disengage from blocking. However, as his grade indicates, he really doesn't bring much to the table in terms of pass rushing. He doesn't really have any moves. He just kind of runs in the general direction of the quarterback, and his hands sure are quick, but
Yeah.
That's about where it ends. So not a ton to write home about on the edge players. They're good, and the run defense. That's kind of their role on this team, but not really a heavy dose of pass rush coming from the edges. Um, at least thus far this year from those two guys.
Yeah. So I have you for the linebackers, which is number 13, D. Winters, number 57, Johnny Hodges, and number 6, Jamoy Hodge. Starting off with D. Winters, and the way this defense works is technically any of these people can play any position at any time. But I'm kind of going with the approximations of what I think they want them to play. And if you get them in the right situation, they would prefer them playing, which is first off, D. Winters, who's probably the more prototypical will linebacker, weak side. He has 29 tackles, 7 TFLs, 4.5 sacks, and 1 pass defense, a 57.0 PFF grade, 58.8 run defense, 62.3 tackling, 72.6 on the pass rush, and then a 49.7 coverage grade. His biggest issue, as you can guess from his grades, is in coverage. And he just gets caught up looking too much at the receiver in zone, and he just doesn't have the athleticism make up for time lost in reading them instead of the quarterback, because that's the main difference in zone and man coverages, as you can guess, is in zone, you're supposed to be reading the quarterback's eyes. In man, you have a guy, defend him. But in zone coverage, he really just doesn't have the athleticism to make up for the situations that he puts himself in with. He doesn't look at the eyes of the quarterback. He doesn't get to them as quickly as he should. He's also sent on a pretty good amount of blitzes, and by design, he loops around a lot more, and he actually does rush. So he's kind of more of that stunt linebacker. Think of how, not Malcolm Rodriguez, but the other linebacker from Oklahoma State last year. There were 2 of them, but the names are escaping me. But he was a good stunt linebacker. He's good at looping around. He's plenty fast enough to where he can get around the edge. He's just not fast enough in coverage, which is a strange problem to have. But he's actually quite strong, and he can hold an edge against a pulling guard. He's not going to bowl through him or anything, but he's not giving up much ground, and he's a tenacious player. He's a tenacious will linebacker. And then after this, I will give you the Mike linebacker in the 2 corners. And you get Johnny Hodges. I think they would want him as the Sam more traditionally, though he plays a little bit more Mike. And he's also a cowboy collar enjoyer, a true man of culture here. We have two cowboy collar enjoyers here. Johnny Hodges is a transfer from Navy. He has 37 tackles, 4 TFLs, and 1.5 sacks. A 61.2 PFF grade, 53.2 run defense, 64.9 tackling, 53.9 in the rush, and 71.7 in coverage. From a mental standpoint, he's not the greatest at initially diagnosing a play. So he'll probably bite on play action if you ask him to. But once he gets it figured out, he's flying towards that play. He plays with his head on fire. And because of that, he can overrun the play in both run defense and coverage. But again, part of that's just his play style. He is someone that plays high speed all the time, go, go, go as fast as you can. And despite his hair on fire approach, he's not the greatest true athlete on the field. And I'm not just saying that because it's the obvious joke to make, but as the Sam linebacker, you typically don't think is, the most insane athlete, but he's just not. He's fine. He's a good athlete. He's obviously a D1 Power 5 athlete, but he's not the greatest. He's not Isaiah Simmons, basically. He also has a tendency to make what I call prayer tackles, something you mostly only see from DBs. And to describe this, it is basically, I have lost this rep. I will now simply dive at your knees and hope that you fall. It's worked for him. It's working. I can't complain. It's working for him. But yeah, I don't know quite what explains his high coverage grade because he's not that great at it. But yeah, you have the Mike and the top two corners.
Yep. So at Mike, you've got one Jamoy Hodge, number 6. He's got 30 tackles on the year, 3 tackles for loss, 2.5 sacks, and then also a pick. His PFF grade so far is 69.4, 81.7 run defense, 77.9 tackling, 50.8 in the pass rush, and then 58.8 in coverage. He's not incredible at blitzing. He's not a great contain player. He's a solid run defender, but he does always rock forward at the beginning of pretty much every play. Um, if he does get asked to go backwards, that's just something that he's not particularly comfortable with. It must just be a habit of some sort, which I mean, again, he's rocking forward at the beginning of every play. So obviously there's a habit there of some sort. Against the run, he doesn't do a great job when he isn't given a clean look. Specifically, other than that, he does kind of hold his own. If he is faced with a lineman or tight end, he doesn't attack them the way that he needs to. Rather, he just tries to power through them with his body and not avoid them or fight through them with his hands. He does play pass reps pretty strangely as well. He almost looks like he's playing spy, but he's too far back for that. But he's too far up to be playing the hole defender and man coverage. So he's certainly doing something.
Yeah,
And he's clearly being instructed to do something, but
yeah,
it is apparently a state secret as as to what that is.
yeah.
So
We say all that, it makes it sound like, he's this irredeemable player. It wasn't intended to sound like that because he actually is quite a good tackler.
yeah,
And his bruising style of playing the run is effective. It's just he's going to meet someone bigger than him and he's going to lose. It's like, that guy that runs up and down Aggieville always looking for a fight. He's going to pick the fight with the 6'5", 285-pound dude and lose. It's he'll hold his own and he's trying, but he can't win fights with linemen. But outside of that, he's a really, really good run defender and a really, really good tackler. It's just everything else.
yeah. But then we can move on from the linebacker room to the corners. We start out with Travius Hodges Tomlinson, number one. Hodges Tomlinson, he's got 21 tackles, 3 pass breakups, and a forced fumble on the season. 66.5% or 66.5 PFF grade, 70.1 run defense, 72.3 tackle, and a 65.2 coverage. He has a weird ability that allows him to make pass breakups at the absolute last possible second by diving. It's like he's in like Madden or something, just like making these dramatic plays. He makes those diving pass breakups really effectively to the point where he's better at it than he would be just standing there trying to bat a ball down.
So strange. So weird.
It is very, very odd. I don't know what to make of that. Other than I'm just picturing him like in his backyard, like in middle school, just like practicing the diving pick constantly. And he just forgets to practice like they're just like doing normal coverage. Like, very theatrical, I guess. But
As corners tend to be.
that is fair. Maybe we should have expected it, but he does play a little bit sticky. By that we mean that he tries to play bully ball. He plays in a unique way of not jamming you at the line, but he tries to merge himself into the receiver's body. Just he be doing
Okay,
something.
I need to explain that.
Please explain this, Ace. I didn't write that. Right.
So what I meant by that is normally whenever you're playing man coverage as a man cover corner, your goal is to be in their hip. You always want to keep at least one hand near or at their hip so you can kind of feel where they're going. But by that extension, you're supposed to leave maybe a couple inches of separation. So that way you're not tripping over, so you're not A, tripping over one another, and B, if he moves to that opposite direction, he's not just like clotheslining you. Travius Hodges Tomlinson does not play by this rule. He is quite literally, that's what it looks like sometimes. And it looks like good coverage. And then they make a move and it's like, oh God, what have I done? He tries to I guess the better way is he's trying to mirror exactly what they're doing, but he's trying to do it like on top of them. It seriously, I if collision was off, if collision was turned off for like 2 seconds on Earth, and he happens to be doing a pass rep, he may end up just like melding like the Terminator through the bars in T2. But I'll let you get back to that. That sometimes I get really tired and then just start writing things that I think are funny. So
Anywho, all the credit in the world to him regardless. He can get absolutely demolished in the running game. But then he immediately sticks his nose right back into the play. So credit to him for having a really high motor. But then we get to the other corner, number 24, Josh Newton. He's a transfer actually from Louisiana Monroe. 15 tackles, 2 tackles for loss, 2 picks, and 4 pass breakups. 77.8 PFF grade, 70.9 run defense, 69 in tackling, and a 79.1 coverage grade. So quite good through this point in the season. He's a great defender in the vertical passing game, no matter what he is doing, whether it be a man or a zone or whatever have you. His biggest weakness, though, is probably over the middle due to his tendency to want to funnel you to the sidelines just because that's what he's comfortable with. But for the most part, though, as a man cover corner, he is really great. Keeps a hand on the receiver to feel for where he's going. He stays in the hip pocket and apparently merges into the receiver's body like
no,
the
that's
Terminator.
Travius. That's just Travius. That's not what you want to do.
No, I'm transplanting it to Josh Newton now. Every TCU corner is turned into like a T800 and just molds through all the laws of physics and just becomes one with the receiver. Playing
Who would you credit
defense.
to the pick if they merged?
Um, I think that you would have to credit the defensive back still, because even if the receiver catches it, it's not of their own volition.
Okay, that's
That would be
fair.
my argument. They
That's
wouldn't
fair.
have they would not have the requisite intent to meet the crime base.
Okay.
I hate myself. Any he stays in his hip pocket really well normally, and he's very hard to beat in true one-on-one reps, especially on the outside. He wants to get you to the sideline and give you little to no room to operate. In zone, he's fine. Leaves a little to be desired. He's a little slower than you'd like reacting to the ball. Kind of sounds reminiscent of Echo in some ways with the elite man coverage. And in zone, solid, but not always the best in terms of positioning, and his reaction could be better.
Yeah.
Obviously not 1-to-1, but in a very broad sense, there are some similarities that you could draw, even if they're not particularly similar players. For one, Josh Newton actually has interceptions. Echo, nobody ever throws at him, so he just doesn't have the opportunity, sadly.
Yeah. Shame.
But yeah, that does it for the corners. So, Ace,
Yeah.
be ready to cover the safeties.
All right. These descriptions are normal. So we can talk about their safeties, which is number 3, Mark Perry, and number 14, Abraham Kamara, and then number 28, Millard Bradford. So let's start with Mark Perry, who's their strong safety. He's a transfer from Colorado. He had 33 tackles on the year and 2.5 TFLs. 66.1 PFF grades, 78 run defense, 81.8 tackling, and then 59.0 in coverage. He's a much better dodger and navigator in the run than a true like force. And that being said, when no one accounts for him in the running game, he's not going to miss that much. And on weaker tight ends, they can get into a bit of trouble if they don't meet him head on. Not pointing any fingers, but they can get him into trouble, and he's a fairly good run defender, which is why he's the strong safety. And in open space, he is going for the prayer tackles. He's going to dive for your shoes and make you trip. It works very well. He's very good at it, but it removes a lot of the big hits that you would expect from, most traditional strong safeties. But his biggest downside is if he is asked to cover anything, and I do mean anything, that is not from a traditional receiver alignment, so not on the outside or in the slot, He gets dusted. He dies. Yeah, he's no. Don't ask him to do that because it's not going to work well for him. And I know that this has become a meme for the Alley Cats meme, but I am unironically paging the Deuce Vaughn wheel route because there was a wheel route that Oklahoma State ran to their running back, and he just declined to close his hands to catch the ball, which would have been a touchdown. The running back simply declined
He
after
should have.
dusting Mark Perry.
It sounds like he should have accepted that actually.
He should have. He should have. He should have accepted that catch.
If I were the running back, I think that's what I would have done in that
I,
situation.
I agree. I would have done that
I
as
think
well.
I would have caught the ball instead of not.
I
If
agree.
if it were me, if I was there, I would have done it differently.
Exactly. Next up is Abraham Kamara, who is the Jack. This is at safety. I have no idea what they call it. It's the Jack safety. Leave me alone. He has 25 tackles, one interception, three pass breakups, and one forced fumble. A 73.8 PFF grade, 77.7 run defense trips, and a 51.9 tackling, 73.1 in coverage. He doesn't play close to the line of scrimmage particularly often, and his coverage ability is solid across the board. He has a little bit of a leverage problem when facing outbreaking routes, but that comes more with positioning because he's kind of taught to cover the inside first and foremost, which as a slot, like a more traditional slot guy, I can see why you'd be coached that way. And he's another big fan of the ankle tackle technique, which has been handed down by defensive backs for generations upon generations. And he's actually really good coming downhill and run support. And he honestly maybe this may be strange to say, but he might be better at it than their actual strong safety. So they basically just
Hmm.
have two strong safeties on the field at all times. Again, I've talked a little bit. There are actually two other safeties, both kind of play the same role, and you can color Millard and Nandi Obiazor.
Yeah. So Millard Bradford, free safety, 17 tackles and four pass breakups thus far. 77.8 in PFF, 78 run defense, 82.4 tackling, 64.6 in the pass rush, and then 74.6 coverage. A few things about him. He does get himself tangled up in his own feet at times. It doesn't stop him from getting pass breakups, but it does cost him interceptions on occasion. He did get dinged up in the KU game, didn't play against Oklahoma State, so not as many notes here on Millard Bradford, other than that's kind of a fun name.
Yeah,
Like,
it's a very fun name.
yeah, very fun name. But respectable season thus far for Mr. Bradford, I guess. But then we can get into Nnamdi Obiezer, number 4. If that name sounds familiar to you, his younger brother, Shitty Obiezer, is a current K-State commit at defensive end. So, yeah, brother at TCU. Nnamdi Obiezer, he also gets free safety snaps. Played in the Oklahoma State game due to injury to Bradford. For a center fielder, his feet are freaky fast. His existence is a bit of a coverage indicator though, because he is pretty much just playing center fielder. And if he's not doing that, he's not doing much at all. He doesn't love to play the hook or the intermediate. But Nnamdi Obiezer, 22 tackles so far on this year, 12 of them solo. No picks, no pass deflections, nothing particular about that. Junior got really good size, 6'3", 210. So good size for the center fielder there. But yeah, really the big fact about him is that his brother is going to play at K-State next year. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, he is a very good center fielder.
Yep. So that is the scouting report. Now we can go into the stories to watch going into the game. First and foremost, how healthy is K-State coming off of their bye week? If Kleiman's to be believed, pretty healthy, the healthiest we've been.
Yeah. This bye week was pretty much perfectly timed, I think, because I feel like if we had played another week or two, I think we would have started to drop games that we shouldn't have because this team was very banged up. A lot of minor injuries, nagging injuries that just needed a break. And we're finally getting that. Finally got that, I should say. And so we should be a lot more healthy and fresh coming into this TCU game, hopefully.
Yeah. You have next
Yeah.
question.
But yeah, next one. This one is the question I'm sure that is on many minds in the Veneer football complex, which is, can K State contain Quentin Johnston? And again, we kind of alluded to this earlier. Keep him under 125. Then that's honestly compared to how he's been playing, that's containing. So, what do we think here, Ace? Is it possible?
He's not going to get erased, but I very much can see a world where we pretty much have a bracket on him at all times. And I could also see a world where, well, this kind of steps on the toes of another question later, but I, okay, I will see a bracket. He gets over 100 yards. I don't think that there's much that we can really do about that just because of how often they scheme him open. So even if he doesn't get the deep ball thrown to him, he's going to get the ball on screens and then break a few tackles by virtue of being massive. So I I don't know. I if the over if the over under was set at like 110.5, that's probably the number that I would start taking the under. But yeah, I don't know. It'll be interesting. What do you think?
Um, I'm hopeful. If we want to reference to last year, how K-State did against him, the week prior to K-State, he went 5 catches for 113. The week after K-State, he went 5 catches, 142, and a touchdown. The week of K-State, he had 2 catches for 5 yards last year. So, granted, this year Quentin Johnston has been different. He's been excellent, even compared to how he did last year. So, I don't have the expectation of holding Quentin Johnston to 2 catches for 5 yards unless we really focus on him and we're just gonna force Max Duggan to beat us with the other guys in the room, which I still think we can do a decent job against.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I like the number of about 125, where if we keep him under 125, then I'm gonna feel pretty good about that. Especially if he's not going off for touchdowns. I mean, because if it's like 100, but he gets like 3 touchdowns, then that's just
Yeah,
as
that's a
bad.
problem.
Yeah, but I mean, as long as we can keep him from like big explosive breakaway touchdowns, things like that, I'm gonna feel good. But I'm not going to this game with the expectation that he's going to have like another 2 catch 5 yard performance like he did against us last year.
Oh God, if
I
we
don't
do
I don't I don't think that's realistic.
if we do that, we're beating TCU by 30.
Yeah, if that happens, yeah, all the calculus around this game changes. So,
Yeah,
but I do not anticipate that.
no. Next question. Can the defensive line group knock Duggan off of his spot? This one's interesting to me, but I want to hear your thoughts first.
Um, I have no idea what to think about this because TCU's given up 9 sacks on the year and 5 of them were in one game, which seems kind of fluky. And then they only gave up 1 sack to Oklahoma State, who has a very good front line. I think the most experienced defensive line in all of college football. Um, I am hopeful that we can do it at least some. I think we're going to be left wanting more pressure from our defensive line in this game. Granted, their defensive line is not, or their offensive line is not incredible. So I'm hopeful, but we shall see. We're going to have to get a little bit more creative with some of our stunts and blitzes, I think, in order to bring more pressure.
Yeah, I if the question is contained to just the defensive line, I would say our best matchup is probably Nate Matlick up against Andrew Coker. And that's just giving Coleman versus Felix the respect it deserves. I still think that Felix, because he is who he is, he'll get his. He'll get pressure. He'll get pressure this game. And he'll knock him off his spot quite a bit. I'm just not sure if he gets all the way home a lot. I that being said, I would take another 6 sack performance. I would simply accept that.
I would 100% allow something like that to happen. Personally, at least I think that'd be a good thing.
Yeah.
But Can K-State avoid the chunk plays that have made TCU so effective on offense?
Maybe. I and not all of that is just Quentin Johnston. A lot of it is containing people like Tay Barber as well, making sure that he doesn't house a slant.
Yeah.
But I think with how good this defense has been defending against the explosive play outside of busts of coverage, I think that there's a good chance that we avoid. They're going to get one or two. That's just how this TCU team operates. If we can limit them to below 4, I feel great about our chances. So not entirely, but more than everyone else has been able to.
Yeah. I kind of feel the same way. I think that we can do a good job at forcing them to sustain a drive, as opposed to living off of big time chunk plays. This defense has been really excellent this year, especially against the pass. Um, right now, I think they're a top 10 pass defense in the country in terms of opponent QBR. Which again, QBR is like kind of flawed, but regardless, there's a flaw with every metric, I guess. But
Yeah,
um,
which is why I hate
I
numbers.
yeah, well, it's a fair reason to hate numbers, but um, I I I hesitantly say yes, but then again, there's a lot of weapons to account for on this TCU offense, so the defense is going to be fully locked in.
Yeah. Next question. Which coverage does K State opt for more often on defense? Do they hope to go with man and contain the weapons and make the receivers beat you, or zone and make Duggan beat you with his brain or the scheme?
Um, Great question. I would say I think we're going to do as much as possible to mix and create confusion in that regard, because I think we generally run a lot more zone than we do man.
Yeah.
And I think that we're going to see closer to a balance in this game because Duggan is a smart quarterback, and he's an accurate quarterback. I think the best thing that we can do is disguise coverage as best we can, and try and not give too many tells for what we're doing, basically play to play. Because I don't think doing one thing primarily for this entire game is going to be helpful.
Yeah.
Because snap to snap, we're gonna have to be doing something different. Because, like you said earlier, they run a lot of different schemes in the passing game that are meant to defeat a lot of different coverages. So the best thing we can do is mix and match what we're doing defensively, and just hope that they don't get the perfect match with us.
Yeah. What I will say is that Max Duggan's worst passing day on the year was up against Oklahoma State. And Oklahoma State did that by running a lot of zone and making Max Duggan read the field and, making sure that because I guarantee you where the ball is going when it's man coverage, it's going to be Johnston. Like that. So the key to this game for me is I would expect a heavy dosage of zone coverage, and I would expect them to not necessarily be exotic looks, but looks that at least makes Max Duggan hesitate and think for a second longer than he's used to. Because Max Duggan, yes, his processor has improved, but he's not patient. He wants that home run ball, and that's why he loves man coverage so much. That's why he loves one-on-one matchups, because that's how you get the home run ball. And Max Duggan is clearly a disciple of the chicks dig the long ball school because he wants to throw it deep. He wants to make sure that he's getting the explosive plays. So I think the big key to this game will be playing a lot of zone coverage and not necessarily making sure that Duggan can beat you with his brain because he can, but making it to where he gets so impatient that he doesn't want to. That to me is why I think they'll lean towards zone.
Yeah, and that's probably a fair perspective. Because man, against Johnston one too many times is going to burn you, whether you like it or not. Um, Unless we can just count on the alien that is Julius Brents to lock him down.
Yeah, visiting Earth and just gonna like bring a spaceship to take the ball out of the air. Goes to Mars.
That would be our best hope as compared to just trying to cover him straight up. But
Yeah.
Yeah. So moving on, does K-State slow down the game and try to limit the number of possessions that TCU gets?
They should. I'm gonna be. You and I had this discussion. If TCU gets an equal amount of plays as us, we've lost. If TCU gets five fewer plays than us, we probably lost. If we end up getting 10 or 15 more plays than them, we've probably won the game. And I don't mean this in terms of pace, because I don't think that this is a game that pace will benefit K State at all. I think the game plan should be to try and. This has the potential for K State to be boring. This has the potential to be a Colin Klein game where we're like, oh, he didn't get any explosive play, not any. He didn't get many explosive plays. Like he didn't call a good game. No, actually, if he got 10 or 15 more plays and killed more clock and limited the possessions they get, he had a great game. You joking? But do you share similar opinions, or do you think they'll go a different route and try to keep pace?
I think whatever pace you take, it has to be with the intention of keeping your offense efficient. I think that there is a world where K-State can have a similar number of plays, but they have to be a lot more efficient in finishing drives than they've shown us to be. Because that's been really the big black mark on the play calling thus far, and the offense as a whole is that when we're in a sustained drive, it seems that we really stall once we get to the opponent's side of the field.
Yeah.
So, if we're able to finish off drives at a regular rate and keep a high points per drive, on sustained drives and not just rely on the explosive play, then that kind of changes things. But we're gonna have to see that to believe that, I think, with this offense. So whatever you can do to limit the amount of time TCU spends with the ball, I think that's an effective strategy because we did do that with Oklahoma because they were getting a lot of yards because they were getting a lot of big chunk plays, but they also did not hold the ball very much, and that was kind of the goal with the offense. It seemed so. We'll probably need to do something similar against TCU.
Yeah. Next question. And this is a big one for me. Can K-State's receivers separate versus a team that likes man coverage? And we'll talk about the second part after this first. What do you think?
No.
Yeah, I'm glad we're in agreement.
I I sincerely hope we can, but I don't expect our receivers to get more separation than they normally would. I think that there's going to be ways that we're able to scheme them open, but it's going to be like pulling teeth. It feels like I think a lot of the passing game is going to have to revolve around Deuce Vaughn, um, and maybe some tight end stuff. But I think we're going to really struggle getting receivers open one on one. Malik Knowles is really going to have to be dialed in for this game because I think he has the best potential against this man coverage by far because he has the ability and stature for it. So we're gonna have to throw with anticipation more than we're used to if we really want to get the receivers involved. And I don't think that's something that they want to do.
Yeah. And you touched upon the second part already, which is running back tight ends passing matchups. But I I think that they eventually get schemed open, and I think it'll be more on shorter stuff because that, other than Josh Newton, they kind of like playing off man coverage as opposed to more press man, which, especially in the slot, they don't press the slot at all, ever. They don't do that. They know it's a bad idea, especially with, having a safety on them. So I could see an argument where Phillip Brooks gets a lot of separation, but on the outside, it might be tough pickings. Deuce Vaughn should separate very well against these linebackers. They do not have someone who can match up with Deuce Vaughn in the passing game. So if Deuce is ever, and I mean ever, this season going to get a lot of receiving yards, it's going to be this game. But you have the final question.
Can K State stay consistent in the second half against a TCU team that has been great at second half adjustment?
I hope so. Like, granted, in two games that they've had to actually adjust in the second half, which is Okie State and KU, they've been good. They've been very good at making adjustments, especially in the Okie State game. The second half, I don't think Okie State scored a touchdown the second half until late, did they?
I
Or was
think
it all
you're
feel?
right.
It was all feel.
It,
They didn't score much, is the point.
yeah, a lot of settling for field goals for Oklahoma State in the second half.
Yeah, so I, this will be a complete game. This won't be a game that, oh, a third quarter is over. I can go home and I can go visit kites. Like it's happy hour early. We're late, I guess, but but it's going to be a nail biter. This is going to be a nail biting game, and it's going to be a coaching battle. These are both two exceptionally well coached teams who have a lot of talent. And to show my cards a little early, I still have us winning this game, but I think that this is a uniquely bad matchup for K State.
Yeah. I'm definitely worried about this, but K-State, if they can pick a week to finally play a complete game, this has to be the week, I think. And we have seen Colin Klein adjust on the fly before. So this is going to have to be the game that happens, I think. We because TCU will adjust to what we are doing. They're in almost all certainty going to come in with a plan to subdue the quarterback run game. We're gonna have to find a way to open that up. We're gonna have to do that early, so that way it's something we can come to later, I think. But either that or they'll pretend it doesn't exist and we just use it all game. We'll see, I guess.
I would accept that outcome.
I would as well.
So now let's go into projected offensive and defensive MVPs. Let's start off with offense, and you can go first with this one.
Yeah, I've got Adrian. I think that he's going to really have to be on his best game yet again for this one, because I think it's going to be slim pickings for the receivers in this one, like we've alluded to. So I think he's going to have to be looking Deuce Vaughn's way more than we have been a lot of the year. I think Deuce Vaughn will. This will be a really good opportunity for him to boost his receiving numbers, which are a little lower than usual for him so far. I am optimistic about that. Adrian should be able to get some nice chunk plays as well on the ground. And I think if we're able to catch TCU in some zone coverages, we'll be able to get some nice plays as well. So I'm rolling with Adrian for me, because I think that he needs to have a clean and aggressive game for us to stand a chance here.
Yeah. And I definitely see a world where it can be Adrian, but I'm actually going to go with Deuce Vaughn, because not only can he bring a lot with his running back vision, and he's pretty well handled TCU his entire career.
Yeah.
He's probably going to be the number one receiver in this day. Also, 9 a.m., the fifth leading rusher in the Big 12 conference.
I'll allow it.
But yeah, I think Deuce. I think the big impact for Deuce is not only going to be in the running game, but in the receiving game. He's going to have a complete game. If we are going to win this game, Deuce needs probably 100 yards on the ground, like 50 yards in the air, just because that's how poorly they every single team that we've had hasn't had someone who perfectly matches up with Deuce Vaughn. TCU doesn't have anyone who's in the same neighborhood or in the same stratosphere. If you put a safety on Deuce Vaughn, he's going to cook them. If you put one of their linebackers on Deuce Vaughn, he may as well throw them to the bottom of a volcano, because they're gonna get Texas toasted into the next existence.
No, Ace, he didn't mention what would happen if they put one of their nose tackles on Deuce Vaughn.
They may just try and body Deuce and get like a DPI. I don't know, but yeah, I think Deuce is the pick for me. And on defense, we actually match, which is Julius Brents, the Condor, not the Condor. Wait, is it the Vulture or the Condor?
I think it's the Condor.
I just always say Echo Island in the Brents Peninsula. So
fair enough.
But I think Brent's, not only because if we're ever going to have a true one-on-one with Quentin Johnston, it has to be Brent's. I love you, Echo, but
no.
it almost has to be Brent's in true one-on-ones, and even then, he's gonna have to be everywhere. He's probably gonna have to stick his nose in and run support again. But I think Julius Brents is probably my pick for defensive MVP. Josh Hayes close second.
Yeah, I'm going with Brents as well, for a similar reason. He is the guy that we have on our entire roster that I truly could see lined up on Johnston and not immediately break a sweat. And because he matches with him physically in terms of build and whatnot. He's been excellent this year in pass coverage for the most part. He's going to have to be the guy at defensive back to stop Quentin Johnson or at least slow him down. So I think that he's an obvious pick. This could really be a breakout game for Julius if they try to force feed Johnston and he plays it well.
Yeah. This is a draft stock game for Julius.
Yes. This could be a draft day highlight montage type of game for Julius Brents if he plays it right.
Yeah.
Like he could come away from this game with a pick, a pass deflection, maybe. Because the ball, if he's going to be lining up on Johnston, the ball is going to be coming his way a lot. So we'll see.
Yeah. Now, finally, score projections. I said earlier that TCU is a team that K-State is a uniquely bad matchup for. And I mean that going both ways, because on defense, K-State is a horrible matchup for TCU because of how good we are at limiting explosive plays and how much pressure we get. However, by the exact same token, if we give them an extra possession, we die. If we need to steal a possession, I project that happening. I project Max Duggan getting impatient and making a bad throw. And if we take advantage of that, that's what we need to. We need to take advantage of that. So we need to play ball control. It's going to be a boring game. If K-State wins with the game plan I think we're going to go with and think we should go with, caveat, I'm not a coach. So by all means, at me on Twitter if this is like a 40-50 game or something and call me a moron and we end up winning. But this is a game where we kind of need to be boring in a sense, but I have 27-21 Cats. I have it being a sweaty up until the very end.
I've got 31-30 K-State. I think this game will come down to K-State being able to do the opposite of what TCU did to Oklahoma State, which is force some drives to end in field goals instead of touchdowns. I think that's going to be the way to victory for K-State. I foresee this being a very tightly contested game. If the cards fall correctly, this is possibly an Arlington rematch. I do have K-State, but this is going to be a very tight game, I think, one way or another.
Yeah. You have any final thoughts before we say goodbye on what has been a very long but very informative episode?
I'm very sad that this game ended up on Fox Sports 1 instead of Fox because of the stupid MLB playoffs. I truly don't care about the playoffs at all.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's an absolute shame. It could have happened to anybody, but hopefully we're able to make up for it with a good time slot the following week, which we don't know yet because we got put in a 6-day selection, but we'll see.
Yep. But that pretty much wraps up this episode of the Aggieville Alleycats podcast. Thank you all so much for listening. If you want to follow or contact the show, we are at Aggieville Alleycats on Twitter. That's capital A, and capital C in cats. If you want to email the show, we are AggievilleAlleycats@gmail.com. If you want to follow us on a more personal note, I am at AC Edwards00.
I am at Connor Baltazar, capital C, capital B.
And if you want to support the show financially, please be sure to check out the official Aggieville Alleycats merch store, where you can find such designs as the staff-approved Doontang Clan, Play Sandstorm Cowards, and Neon Alleycats. But most importantly, thank you all for listening to this episode of the Aggieville Alleycats podcast. Where come rain, shine, or anything in between, we're here to deliver to you the Kansas State sporting news that you so love. Stay safe, Alleycats.